There are vegetable pairs that seem harmless when planted side by side. You put them in neighboring rows, thinking you are maximizing space, optimizing your garden layout, doing everything right. But underground, invisible to your eye, one plant is slowly killing the other. Through its roots. Through chemical warfare so subtle, you will not notice until harvest time when one crop is stunted, bitter, diseased, or completely dead. And the worst part? Nobody tells you this. Not the seed packets, not the gardening magazines, not the YouTube channels sponsored by companies that profit from your repeated failures. Because if you knew which plants are incompatible, if you understood the biochemical battles happening beneath your soil, you would stop making expensive mistakes. You would stop buying replacements, stop purchasing treatments for mysterious plant diseases, stop wondering why your tomatoes died next to that innocent-looking fennel. Stay until the end and you will learn the 10 deadliest vegetable combinations, the exact science behind why they fail, and most importantly, what you should plant instead. This is not folklore. This is agricultural chemistry that has been documented, tested, and deliberately kept from backyard gardeners because knowledge is power, and power does not sell fertilizer. Let's start with the most toxic pair in the garden. Tomatoes and fennel. You plant them near each other because they both like sun, both need similar watering schedules, both seem like Mediterranean companions. Wrong. Fennel is a biochemical assassin. Its roots secrete compounds called phenolic acids and volatile oils that are toxic to almost everything around it. These compounds leak into the soil, spread through the root zone, and directly inhibit the growth of neighboring plants. For tomatoes, this is catastrophic. Tomatoes are sensitive to allelopathic interference, meaning they cannot tolerate chemical signals from aggressive plants. When you put tomato and fennel together, the fennel releases chemicals that disrupt the tomato's ability to absorb nutrients. The tomato starts showing signs of stress, yellowing leaves, stunted growth, poor fruit set. You think it is a disease. You think you are not watering correctly. But the real killer is invisible, seeping from the fennel roots. Studies from agricultural universities show that tomatoes planted within 3 feet of fennel have a 30 to 40% reduction in yield. Not because of pests, not because of disease, but because of chemical warfare at the root level. The solution? Never plant fennel near tomatoes. Keep them at opposite ends of your garden. Better yet, grow fennel in a container isolated from everything else. What should you plant next to tomatoes instead? Basil, marigolds, carrots. These are allies, not enemies. They enhance tomato growth, repel pests, and create synergy instead of sabotage. Next pair, onions and beans, or onions and peas. Any allium near any legume is a disaster waiting to happen. Here is why. Beans and peas have a superpower. They form symbiotic relationships with the nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil. These bacteria live on the roots of legumes, creating nodules where they convert atmospheric nitrogen into a form plants can use. It is free fertilizer, generated biologically. But onions destroy this process. Onions release sulfur compounds from their roots. These compounds are antimicrobial. They kill bacteria, including the beneficial nitrogen-fixing bacteria that legumes depend on. When you plant onions next to beans, you are sabotaging the very mechanism that makes beans productive. The bean plants struggle to access nitrogen. They grow weak, produce fewer pods, and become vulnerable to disease. Meanwhile, the onions do fine because they do not depend on nitrogen fixation. They are stealing the advantage. Research from soil science institutes confirms that legumes planted within 1 foot of onions show a 50% reduction in nodule formation. That translates directly to reduced growth and yield. The alternative? Plant onions next to carrots, lettuce, or brassicas. Plant beans next to corn, squash, or cucumbers. Keep the alliums and legumes separated, and both will thrive. Now the third pair, and this one is tricky, because people do it all the time without realizing the danger. Potatoes and tomatoes. They are both nightshades, same family, Solanaceae, and that is precisely the problem. When you plant members of the same family together, you concentrate their shared vulnerabilities. Both potatoes and tomatoes are susceptible to late blight, caused by the pathogen Phytophthora infestans. This is the same disease that caused the Irish potato famine. It spreads through water, through soil, through the air. If one plant gets infected, the disease jumps to the neighboring plant almost instantly. You lose both crops, not just reduced yield, total loss. Beyond disease, potatoes and tomatoes also compete for the same nutrients. They both demand high potassium, high phosphorus. When planted together, they deplete the soil faster than it can regenerate. One or both will suffer nutrient deficiency. Add to that the fact that tomato plants can harbor Colorado potato beetles, which then migrate to the potatoes and devastate them. It is a triple threat: shared disease, nutrient competition, and pest transfer. The smart move: never plant potatoes and tomatoes in the same bed or even in adjacent beds. Rotate them to different areas of your garden each year. What works well with potatoes, beans, corn, cabbage, marigolds? What works well with tomatoes? Basil, carrots, onions, parsley. Keep them apart and you protect both. Have you ever planted two vegetables together and watched one mysteriously fail while the other thrived? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know how many of you have experienced this frustration without understanding what caused it. Fourth pair: cucumbers and sage. You might think herbs are harmless companions for vegetables, but sage is an aromatic powerhouse that cucumbers cannot tolerate. Sage produces high concentrations of essential oils, specifically compounds like thujone and camphor. These oils volatilize into the air and also leach into the soil through root exudates and leaf decomposition. Cucumbers are extremely sensitive to these compounds. The oils interfere with cucumber growth hormones, stunting the vines and reducing fruit production. You will notice that cucumber plants near sage grow slower, have fewer flowers, and produce smaller, misshapen fruits. This is not a watering issue. It is biochemical inhibition. Agricultural research on companion planting has documented that cucumbers planted within 2 feet of sage show a 25 to 35% decrease in productivity. The mechanism is called allelopathy, the chemical inhibition of one plant by another. Sage is great for your garden, just not near cucumbers. Plant cucumbers with beans, corn, radishes, or dill. Plant sage with rosemary, thyme, or in its own dedicated herb bed. Separation is key. Fifth pair: carrots and dill. This one surprises people because dill is often recommended as a companion plant, and it can be, but not for carrots. Here is the issue. Carrots and dill are both in the Apiaceae family. They are relatives. When they flower, they can cross-pollinate. If you are saving seeds, this ruins both crops. But even if you are not saving seeds, there is another problem. Dill and carrots compete for the exact same nutrients in the exact same soil zone. Both have taproots that extend to similar depths. Both need high levels of potassium and trace minerals. When planted together, they battle for resources. Neither gets enough. The result? Carrots become stunted, bitter, and woody. Dill grows leggy and weak. Beyond competition, there is evidence that dill releases root exudates that interfere with carrot flavor compounds. Carrots grown near dill often taste bitter or off. This is documented in studies on vegetable quality and companion planting interactions. If you want sweet, tender carrots, keep dill far away. Plant carrots with onions, leeks, rosemary, or sage instead. These companions either repel carrot pests or do not compete for the same resources. And if you love dill, plant it with cucumbers, cabbage, or lettuce, where it acts as a beneficial companion. Sixth pair, cabbage and strawberries. This combination seems random, but people plant them together more often than you would think, especially in raised beds where space is tight. The problem is not chemical, it is ecological. Cabbage and strawberries attract the same pests, specifically slugs and aphids. Slugs love the moist, cool environment under cabbage leaves. They also love strawberries. When you plant both together, you create a pest paradise. The slugs feed on the cabbage, then migrate to the strawberries, devouring the fruit. Aphids follow a similar pattern. They infest cabbage, then spread to strawberries, sucking sap and transmitting diseases. Instead of isolating the problem, you are concentrating it. Beyond pests, cabbage is a heavy feeder, demanding massive amounts of nitrogen. Strawberries need moderate nitrogen, but high potassium and phosphorus. When planted together, the cabbage dominates, pulling nitrogen out of the soil faster than strawberries can compete. The strawberries weaken, produce fewer berries, and become disease-prone. The fix is simple. Do not plant cabbage and strawberries together. Plant cabbage with onions, beans, or potatoes. Plant strawberries with borage, thyme, or garlic, which repel pests and do not compete for the same nutrients. Separate gardens, separate problems. Seventh pair, beets and spinach. Both are nutrient-dense, both grow quickly, both seem compatible. But they are too similar. That is the issue. Beets and spinach are both ctenopods, meaning they are in the same plant family. They have nearly identical nutrient requirements, especially for iron, magnesium, and manganese. When you plant them together, they compete fiercely for these micronutrients. The soil cannot supply enough for both. One will dominate, usually the beets, because they have deeper roots. The spinach suffers, growing pale, thin, and prone to bolting. Beyond nutrient competition, beets and spinach are susceptible to the same diseases, particularly downy mildew and leaf spot. If one gets infected, the disease spreads instantly to the other. You lose both crops. Agricultural Extension Services warn against planting ctenopods together for exactly this reason. It is like putting two bodybuilders on the same limited diet. Neither gets enough to perform well. Instead, plant beets with onions, garlic, or lettuce. Plant spinach with strawberries, peas, or radishes. These pairings avoid competition and create healthier growing conditions. If what you are hearing makes sense, hit that subscribe button now. And drop a like if you want more videos exposing the garden mistakes that cost you time and money. Because what comes next gets even more specific. We are diving into 3 more deadly pairs, and the science behind them will change how you plan your garden forever. 8th pair, peppers and fennel. Just like tomatoes, peppers cannot coexist with fennel. Fennel's allelopathic compounds are ruthless. They inhibit the growth of almost all vegetables, but peppers are especially vulnerable. Peppers are slow growers. They need a long season to establish roots, develop foliage, and produce fruit. When fennel is nearby, the chemical interference from fennel roots disrupts pepper development at every stage. Germination is slower. Seedlings are weaker. Mature plants produce fewer peppers, and the peppers they do produce are smaller and less flavorful. Studies on allelopathy in vegetable gardens show that peppers planted within 3 feet of fennel experience a 40% reduction in fruit yield. That is nearly half your harvest, lost to invisible chemical warfare. Fennel does not care. It thrives regardless. But your peppers pay the price. The solution is absolute separation. Never plant fennel anywhere near peppers. If you love fennel, give it its own isolated bed or container where it cannot poison your other crops. What should you plant with peppers? Basil, onions, carrots, and spinach. These companions enhance pepper growth, repel pests, and create no chemical conflict. Ninth pair, garlic and beans, or garlic and peas. Any allium paired with any legume creates the same problem we discussed with onions. Garlic releases sulfur compounds that are antimicrobial. These compounds kill the nitrogen-fixing bacteria that live on legume roots. Without these bacteria, beans and peas cannot access atmospheric nitrogen. They become nitrogen-starved. Growth slows. Yields drop. Meanwhile, garlic does perfectly fine because it does not rely on nitrogen fixation. It is a one-sided battle where garlic wins and beans lose. Research from agricultural institutes shows that beans planted within 8 inches of garlic have significantly fewer root nodules and reduced biomass. The impact is measurable and severe. But here is the twist. Garlic is an excellent companion for almost everything else. Tomatoes, peppers, carrots, brassicas all benefit from garlic's pest-repelling properties. Just keep it away from legumes. Plant beans with corn, cucumbers, or radishes. Plant garlic with tomatoes, carrots, or strawberries. Simple separation, massive improvement. 10th and final pair, corn and tomatoes. This pairing seems logical because both are heavy feeders that like full sun and warm soil. But they share 2 critical problems. First, nutrient competition. Corn is a nitrogen glutton. It pulls nitrogen out of the soil faster than almost any other crop. Tomatoes also need high nitrogen, especially during early growth. When you plant them together, they compete intensely. One will suffer, usually the tomatoes, because corn roots are more aggressive. The tomatoes become stunted, pale, and produce poorly. Second problem, shared pests. Specifically, the tomato hornworm and the corn earworm, which are the same species at different life stages. If you plant corn and tomatoes together, you create a continuous buffet for this pest. It feeds on corn, then migrates to tomatoes, devastating both. You are doubling the damage instead of isolating it. Studies on crop rotation and companion planting emphasize that corn and tomatoes should be separated not just in space, but in time. Do not plant them together, and do not plant one where the other grew the previous year. What works with corn? Beans, squash, cucumbers, the classic Three Sisters combination. What works with tomatoes? Basil, carrots, onions, marigolds. Keep corn and tomatoes apart, and both will flourish. Now let's talk about the science behind all of this. Why do some plants kill their neighbors? The answer lies in 3 mechanisms: allelopathy, competition, and disease sharing. Allelopathy is chemical warfare. Plants produce compounds in their roots, leaves, or flowers that inhibit the growth of nearby plants. Fennel, sage, and certain alliums are masters of this. They release toxins that disrupt germination, root development, or nutrient uptake in sensitive species. This is not accidental. It is evolutionary strategy. By suppressing competitors, allelopathic plants secure more resources for themselves. The second mechanism is competition. When plants have similar nutrient needs, similar root structures, or similar light requirements, they battle for the same resources. Beets and spinach compete for micronutrients. Corn and tomatoes compete for nitrogen. Carrots and dill compete for everything. In these situations, one plant usually dominates while the other starves. The third mechanism is disease sharing. Plants in the same family often share vulnerabilities to the same pathogens and pests. Potatoes and tomatoes both suffer from late blight. Cabbage and other brassicas share clubroot and aphids. When you plant relatives together, you concentrate disease risk. One infection wipes out multiple crops. Understanding these mechanisms changes everything. It transforms you from a passive gardener, following generic advice, into an active strategist who designs plant guilds based on biochemistry and ecology. You stop making the mistakes that drain your time, money, and patience. You start seeing your garden as an ecosystem where every plant interaction matters. And this knowledge is not new. Indigenous farmers understood companion planting long before modern science explained it. They knew that beans, corn, and squash grow well together. They knew that certain herbs protect certain vegetables. They practiced polyculture, growing diverse species together in ways that maximized mutual benefit and minimized conflict. But industrial agriculture erased this knowledge. Monoculture became the norm. Diversity was replaced with dependency on fertilizers, pesticides, and corporate seeds. And when backyard gardeners tried to reclaim food production, they were given oversimplified advice that ignored the complexity of plant interactions. That is why you see contradictory information online. One source says, plant dill with carrots. Another says, keep them apart. One expert recommends fennel as a companion plant. Another warns it is a garden assassin. The truth is nuanced. It depends on what you are growing, where you are growing it, and what your goals are. But the 10 pairs I have outlined are universal no-goes. Avoid them, and you will eliminate a massive source of garden failure. Tomato and fennel, onion and beans, potato and tomato, cucumber and sage, carrot and dill, cabbage and strawberry, beet and spinach, pepper and fennel, garlic and beans, corn and tomato. Memorize these. Plan your garden around them, and you will see immediate improvements in plant health and productivity. Here is the alternative strategy. Use companion planting guides that are based on science, not folklore. Look for research from agricultural universities, extension services, and peer-reviewed studies. Avoid generic lists that lump everything together without explanation. Understand the why behind the recommendations. When you know that onions kill nitrogen-fixing bacteria, you understand why they should not be near beans. When you know that fennel releases allelopathic toxins, you understand why it should be isolated. Knowledge gives you control, and control gives you results. Let me give you a practical framework for planning your garden. Start by grouping plants into families: nightshades, brassicas, legumes, alliums, cucurbits. Within each family, recognize that plants share traits, vulnerabilities, and needs. Do not plant family members together unless you have a specific reason, like succession planting. Next, identify heavy feeders and light feeders. Heavy feeders are corn, tomatoes, cabbage, squash. Light feeders are beans, peas, carrots, radishes. Alternate them in your garden beds. Follow a heavy feeder with a light feeder to prevent soil depletion. Then, consider allelopathic plants: fennel, sage, walnut trees, sunflowers, and certain grasses release compounds that inhibit neighbors. Isolate these, give them space, do not crowd them with sensitive species. Finally, use pest and disease ecology to your advantage. If you know that aphids love cabbage and strawberries, do not plant them together. If you know that hornworms attack tomatoes and corn, separate those crops. You are not just planting vegetables. You are designing an ecosystem that resists pests and diseases naturally. There is another layer to this: succession planting and crop rotation. Even compatible plants should not occupy the same space year after year. Rotate plant families through different beds annually. This prevents soil nutrient depletion and breaks pest and disease cycles. If you grew tomatoes in bed A this year, plant beans there next year. If you grew cabbage in bed B, plant carrots there next season. This rotation, combined with smart companion planting, creates a resilient, productive garden that improves over time instead of degrading. Some gardeners ask, what if my space is limited? What if I cannot separate incompatible plants by 3 feet or more? The answer is vertical separation and container gardening. Grow fennel in a container isolated from your main beds. Grow tomatoes on one side of the yard and potatoes on the other. Use trellises to create vertical zones where climbing plants like beans and cucumbers grow upward, leaving ground space for root crops like carrots and beets. Maximize space intelligently, not desperately. Every square foot should serve a purpose, and every plant should have compatible neighbors. Let's address a common myth. Some gardening sources claim that all plants can coexist if you just add enough fertilizer and water. This is false. Chemical warfare cannot be neutralized with NPK. Allelopathic toxins do not disappear because you added compost. Disease pathogens do not care how much you water. These are biological realities that transcend inputs. You cannot fertilize your way out of a bad planting decision. The only solution is proper planning from the start. Now I want to talk about the economic impact of these mistakes. When you plant incompatible vegetables together, you are not just losing yield, you are losing money. The cost of seeds, soil amendments, water, time, and effort all go into every plant you grow. If half your tomatoes fail because they are next to fennel, you have wasted half your investment. If your beans produce poorly because they are next to onions, you are losing food and money. Multiply this across an entire garden, across multiple seasons, and the losses add up to hundreds of dollars. Meanwhile, if you had simply separated those plants, your costs would stay the same, but your yields would double or triple. That is the power of knowledge. It turns failure into success without spending more money. You just spend smarter. There is also a sustainability angle. When plants fail due to incompatibility, gardeners often blame themselves and reach for chemical solutions. They buy fungicides for diseases that would not have spread if plants were separated. They buy insecticides for pests that would not have concentrated if the garden ecology was balanced. They buy synthetic fertilizers to compensate for nutrient competition that should not have existed. This creates a cycle of dependency on products that mask symptoms instead of solving root causes. Breaking that cycle means understanding plant relationships and designing gardens that work with nature, not against it. Let me give you a success story. A gardener I know was struggling for years. Tomatoes died mysteriously. Beans barely produced. Carrots were bitter. She blamed her soil, her climate, her skills. Then she learned about companion planting. She discovered she had been putting tomatoes next to fennel, beans next to onions, and carrots next to dill, all the deadly pairs. She redesigned her garden, separating incompatible plants and grouping beneficial companions. The next season, her yields tripled. Same soil, same climate, same effort, different results, all because she stopped making invisible mistakes. That is what this knowledge does. It reveals the invisible. It shows you the underground chemical battles, the nutrient competitions, the disease pathways that you cannot see, but that determine success or failure. And once you see them, you cannot unsee them. You start planning every garden with intention. You stop guessing and start strategizing. You become the kind of gardener who does not just grow food, but cultivates abundance. So here is my challenge to you. Look at your current garden or your garden plan for this season. Identify any of the 10 deadly pears. Are you planting tomatoes near fennel, onions near beans, potatoes near tomatoes? If so, redesign. Move things around. Separate the enemies. Group the allies. And then watch what happens. Watch your plants thrive in ways they never did before. Watch your yields increase without spending more money or time. Watch your garden transform from a place of frustration to a place of abundance. And if you are just starting, if you are planning your first garden, you have an advantage. You can avoid these mistakes from day one. You can design a garden based on compatibility, not convenience. You can set yourself up for success instead of learning through failure. Use the knowledge you have gained here. Apply it ruthlessly. And you will skip years of trial and error. One more thing, share this information. Most gardeners are making these mistakes without knowing it. They are following bad advice from outdated sources. They are trusting seed packet instructions that ignore plant interactions. If you know someone who gardens, send them this video. If you are in a gardening group, share these insights. Knowledge is not meant to be hoarded. It is meant to be spread. And the more gardeners who understand companion planting, the more food we collectively produce, the less we depend on industrial agriculture, the stronger our communities become. Now, the final question. Are you going to redesign your garden based on what you have learned here? Yes or no? Write it in the comments. I want to know who is ready to take action, because information without action is just entertainment. But action based on solid information is transformation. If this video opened your eyes to mistakes you did not know you were making, smash that subscribe button. Leave a like to push this information to more gardeners who need it, and drop a comment sharing which of the 10 deadly pears you have been planting together. Let's learn from each other. Let's build a community of gardeners who understand the science, not just the folklore. More videos like this are coming. On soil health, on pest management, on seed saving, on everything the industrial system does not want you to know. This is not just about gardening. It is about autonomy. It is about producing your own food on your own terms without dependency on systems designed to keep you buying. Next video drops soon. Until then, walk through your garden with new eyes. See the invisible wars happening under your feet. And ask yourself, are my plants allies or enemies? Because that one question will determine whether you harvest abundance or frustration. The choice is yours.